Saints Row, released August of 2022. Available on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC platforms. Pricing varies wildly exactly where and how you get this game, being $59.99 on the PlayStation and Xbox storefronts, but only $29.99 on Steam. And physically, copies of this game can be found for $19.99 very easily. Saints Row is the newest game in the Saints Row franchise, and was intended to be a reboot for the series. So gone are the supernatural elements that were present in the last couple of games, with things broadly scaled back to be somewhat more realistic. So no aliens, no superpowers, no trips to space or hell. Instead, we're in a fictional southwestern town modeled loosely on Las Vegas. The player character is currently sharing an apartment with 3 other characters. And each of the characters, including yourself, is at least loosely affiliated with one of the gangs in the game. And despite all of these organizations being at odds with one another, it's somehow fine to be living with the enemy. And these characters are not what you would expect from a Saints Row game. In fact, the characters from earlier games would have at the very least made fun of these people, and at worst probably would have had them taken care of out of sheer annoyance. But shortly into this game, all of the characters find themselves disillusioned with the gang they're currently affiliated with, and decide they'll start a gang, coincidentally called the Saints. And conveniently, they find a church to take over on 3rd Street, and almost immediately, and with virtually no pushback, set up a sphere of influence within the town. And setting up and expanding your sphere of influence actually leads to this game's biggest problem. That being repetition. So it goes like this. You choose a business to be a front for your illegal operation. In that section of the city, 5 problems will then pop up. One will be finding a police van, one will be finding a stash and taking it, the other 3 will just be wiping out little groups of enemies. You will do these same 5 things for every section of the city ultimately. You will then have some task to actually do for whatever the business is. You will have to do it 4 to 7 times. Once you do that, the business is completely set up and is making the maximum amount of money that it can make. Other than that, there are side jobs you can take, being the equivalent of the mini-games you used to do in other Saints Row games, except there's nothing forcing you to do them this time, outside of 100% completion. And of course, being an open-world game, there are things to just find on the map. Pallets of, product, dumpsters to dive in, sites where you have to find the history of an area. These all give you a small amount of experience and money, but again, outside of just getting 100% completion, there's nothing pressuring you to keep doing this for any gameplay reason. As you do need money to set up more front businesses to expand your empire, but just passively waiting for money to accrue is much more efficient than hunting down anything on the map. In general, everything here feels so soft and kinda toothless. It's sorta like when you see an R-rated movie that's been cut down for TV. Because yeah, you can tell this is Saints Row, but someone has gone through and taken out anything that had any bite to it to make it more palatable for a mid-Saturday audience on TV. One of the only bright spots in this game is a mechanic that has been added to the combat. When you are fighting hordes of enemies, be they cops or from one of the other factions, they will sometimes call for reinforcements. You can see that they're doing this, and you can interrupt them from doing it. And if you can eliminate all of the enemies in front of you without letting them call for backup, your notoriety is wiped clean. So if you choose to stand and fight, it doesn't lead to infinite combat, it just leads to you taking care of anyone that knows what's going on, and you can then go about your business. And honestly, this is a mechanic that I wish would show up in other open-world games. Other than that, it's just a series of minor annoyances. I was a little bothered by the fact you couldn't have a Cockney accent like in the other games, as that's always been my voice of choice for all of the other games. Because the game has a vaguely southwestern setting, there's a ton of Breaking Bad references everywhere. And that's cute the first dozen or so times it happens. Then it still happens 3,000 more times. There's also a ton of references to the other Saints Row games, which I understand why, as this is part of a franchise, but all it does is make me wish I were playing one of those games. It's sort of like when you watch something with Jim Belushi in it, and you just wish, like, wow, it'd be great if John Belushi were still around. So, is the Saints Row reboot worth your time and money? No! No, it is not. This is a reboot that really forgot what the series was supposed to be. Saints Row, as a series, started off as a very on-the-nose Grand Theft Auto knockoff. But its sequels set themselves apart from that by being much more over-the-top and tongue-in-cheek than GTA ever gets to be. Ultimately taking this to extremes where you're fighting aliens and in hell and have superpowers. And while I do agree it would be hard to go more over the top than those games, scaling it back like this game chooses to do didn't also have to rob the game of all of its teeth and soul. Because there's a version of this game that could have had so much more fun with the premise, and kept that same spirit that Saints Row 2 and Saints Row the Third had, and maybe made it so there was a little more variation in gameplay on offer. Unfortunately, I've heard that the studio that made this has closed down, so this may be the tombstone for the Saints Row series. If morbid curiosity or devotion to the series makes you really want to play this reboot, I would recommend getting it physically for $20, or better yet, waiting till it's even cheaper than that. I think $15 might be about the right price for this. Although, I think I would recommend to you to just replay the other games in the series instead, because Saints Row the Third and Saints Row 4 are both available on all modern platforms, and Saints Row 2 is available on Xbox and on PC. All three of those games are more worth your time than this reboot. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.